Yes. You can just unmute yourself. So do you have any expectations for the session? تطلعات, انتظارات. So what do you really want to get out of this session? Yes? Yes, go ahead, Mr. Yahya. Yes, Mr. Yahya, you've raised your hand. Just unmute yourself and speak.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me, please?
Perfectly, I can hear you. You may proceed.
How are you, Mr. Brahim?
Alhamdulillah,
I
all is
hope
well, thank you.
everybody here is good and great. So first of all, thank you for your for this session and for this initiative. It is really really appreciated. Mhm. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Shaban?
yes. Thank you very much, dear Yahya.
So
Yes.
my expectations is it's all about for me. It's all about terminology. I want to know a lot about this about terminology, how it works, you know, and of course about translation and interpreting in general. So I think this session will be very very fruitful, and we will be very great to benefit from it. And thank you very much.
Thank you, dear Mr. Yahya, and we will do our best
Thank you.
to be up to the expectations. And of course, for terminology, we have our excellent researcher, Faycal Seffar, who I'm sure
Okay.
would, Faycal Seffar, one of the main speakers, and he will be speaking namely about terminology. So do not hesitate to ask him questions, and of course, do
Thank
not
you.
hesitate to draw benefits of his session. Yes, we have
Thank you so much.
another hand raised. Yes, Khadija?
Assalamu alaikum. I hope all of you doing great. Do you hear me, guys?
Yes, we can hear you perfectly.
I expect that the session will include more information about translation, like the types of translation, also how translators work. For example, when we talk about domestication and foreignization that are included with for translation. Also, I expect that session will be more useful in terms of interpreting and terminology and so on.
Amazing. And for that, we have in particular Mr. Ahmed Bangoura, who will be speaking about translation. So we're expecting to get a lot of Mr. Ahmed. Thank you for your remarks. Yes, Flash Trans Mohammed.
Good evening, everybody. It's me, Mr. Brahim. My other computer did not work. So, for the record, Hassan Yousfi. What I want to say is allow me at the outset to thank you and the other panelists for organizing this webinar and also the organizing committee, namely the Department of Translation in Nador. What I hope to achieve, Mr. Brahim, is to better my note-taking skills for the consecutive interpreting, especially when it comes to symbol creations. Are there any universally accepted symbols to refer to words, concepts that may crop up during the interpreting process? That's it, and thank you again, Mr. Brahim.
Very interesting. You're wholeheartedly welcome, Mr. Hassan. I think you have to unmute the other device so that there will be no echo. So thank you very much, dear Hassan. And of course, I'll be focusing namely on interpreting. And I will get the chance, of course, to relate to consecutive interpreting and note taking. And of course, I can share some remarks in that regard with you, dear Hassan. So thank you very much for being here and for taking part in this webinar.
Good evening, everyone. Do you hear me? First, I want to thank the coordinators for sharing the link of this session. I think during this session, we will explore how different contexts shapes the terminological choices of translator and interpreter. So that's my expectations of this session.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
Good evening, everyone. I hope that my voice is being heard. I'm very happy to be here because I was one of the students of the first generation of this master's in Nador, and I've just graduated. So it's an honor to have like this combination of the two masters together. Well, for the expectations, first, I'm very interested in the terminology part because I know that what makes it a good translation, a good one, is the choice of these, words. So I think that what some of our speakers will cover is this how to choose the good words and what makes is a good word a good one, because it affects meaning, it affects a lot of things. And I think we might also cover some of the theories, concerning interpreting. I think the people here might also cover certain things that have to do with the types, I don't know, things to make translation like better.
Thank you very much, and that's well noted. And to be honest with you guys, so basically we have many things to cover. That's why so I will switch between Arabic and English because this is a translational session. So since we have a different domains and things, since we have different themes, and of course to cover, we can't just cover all of that in 2 hours. That's almost impossible. That's why ارتأينا أن تكون هذه الحصة فقط توطئة لبعض المصطلحات الأساسية وبعض المفاهيم الأساسية في الترجمة المصطلحية والترجمة الفورية. That's why we will be giving you some pieces of advice, some orientations, some real life experiences so that you can really benefit from that. But in the meantime, في نفس الآن, we can of course, you can ask questions, you can interact in the chat box, you can ask whatever questions you have, and the speakers respectively will relate to your questions. Okay, so basically we have already prepared some presentations on translation, terminology, and interpreting, but this doesn't really mean that we're not going to open up to other themes, other, I don't know, maybe other questions, like you've just mentioned, theories. Okay, so yeah, we can also tap into that. But of course, the main focus will be the presentations that we have already prepared for this session. So we really want things to be systematic in the sense that we will be giving you the presentations orally. So that would be theoretically the theoretical part. Then we are going to share with you the practical aspects. Okay, so we as the speakers, and I will be sharing some very practical guidance with you. And then, of course, inshallah, you will have a Q&A session in which you can ask all of your questions.
If you might, would you mind?
Yes, absolutely. Go ahead, sir.
Okay, what I personally hope to gain today is a clearer and more practical understanding of how interpreting decisions are made in real time, not only that of the linguistic level, but also in terms of strategy, note-taking techniques, and the management of cognitive load, okay? I'm also very interested in seeing how terminology management is handled in professional settings. How interpreters prepare glossaries, how they deal with new or unfamiliar concepts on the spot, and how they maintain consistency in specialized fields. So overall, my expectation is to leave this session with concrete, applicable insights, tools and methods that we as students can start integrating in our training immediately. And thank you so much for accepting to be part of our session once again. I really appreciate you guys.
Very interesting, and we will be doing our best, inshallah.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Thank you for this opportunity. So, what I'm looking forward into in this session is learning how to prepare effectively, especially in terms of terminology, before interpreting and before entering the booth. I mean.
So preparation, yes. So you see, speaking of preparation here, I would really want to draw your attention to the fact that preparation in interpreting differs from that of translation, because you see, translation, you have the time. Okay, so لديكم التسع من الوقت, so to look for terms, to look for the most used, okay, so the right word in the right context, and you also have the time to edit and review your translation. But interpreting, on the other hand, you do not have that luxury. So preparation vis-a-vis interpreting is really vital, because it gets you half way to getting the job done. So when you are well prepared, believe me, that would significantly impact your performance. Yes, so we've talked about theories in translation slash interpreting. You've also mentioned the concept of, or the elements of preparedness. You also talked about, we talked about by far note taking, consecutive interpreting, so modes of interpreting. So you see, we really have embarras de richesse. We really have a wide range of themes to cover by far. And hopefully after the presentations, we will have time to listen more to you and to have your feedback, and of course to answer your questions, namely, because again, the aim of this session is that it serves as a stepping stone into this tripartite translational session of translation, interpreting, and terminology.
Thank you, Si Hadi. So what I expect from what I expect to learn from this webinar is to basically how to overcome the difficulties specifically in simultaneous interpreting, given the fact that we use the same channel for interpreting. So how to overcome the difficulty in speaking at the same time. This is the main challenge that I want to understand how to overcome.
Can you repeat the question? I didn't get that.
So my question is how to overcome the difficulties in simultaneous interpreting, specifically that we talk and listen at the same time. So this is my question: how to overcome this challenge?
Now, if one wants to overcome this challenge, so this has to do with multitasking. So one should practice more multitasking, and we should also be able to split the attention. That is, to be able to listen and to monitor one's performance in the same time to speak. So I think that that's something, I wouldn't say it's innate, but I would think that I would say that it can be developed thanks to practice.
Mr. Brahim, I have this idea on mind. Do you think, or don't you think, that this is something that one, gets used to by time? I think it's a habit. Like when you learn how to overcome certain difficulties when it comes to interpreting or, just translating something. I think it's something we learn by time and with practice. Don't you think so?
Yes, so indeed, as I've before mentioned, so it has to do with practice. So the more you practice multitasking, the more it becomes really, it comes at ease, and it becomes really robotic in your interpreting. But for translation, I'm not sure about where this aspect can fit in translation, that is multitasking. But anyways, as far as interpreting is concerned, yes, it can be developed with time and with practice.
By the way, I want to add something so that I don't forget it. For all the participants, I encourage you to write down your names and emails so that you receive participation certificates from our coordinator. Okay, please type out your names, full names, as well as your emails so that I send you your online certificates. Okay. هادشي اللي بغيت نقول انايا، راه الصباح وكنتسناو البروف وقال لي الغزيوي تسناه وكذا، فهمتي. والله الا غنمشي الويت حتى انا، راه باقا فيه الحال كاع على الطلبه، على الدراري. المهم Mr. Brahim, I'm sorry because our professor hasn't yet joined us. I think that we should just proceed, okay? He can join us later,
Yes.
okay?
By the way, hello, Mr. Hadi
Mm.
and Mr. Brahim. Thank you so much for your attendance today. My name is Mohammed Al-Ghaziwi. Like I said before, I'm the coordinator of the second generation. I just want to express my apologies for Mr. Bibasha's absence. Mr. Al-Qasmi, our dear professor, he is also specialized in translation. He will take the initiative and say the opening statement so as we can start our webinar that we all wish to be like fruitful and beneficial to all the students of the Department of English Studies here in Nador and the others in the other departments, inshallah. So I will give the floor to Mr. Al-Qasmi, and then I wish the webinar will go in a fantastic manner, inshallah. So thank you so much.
Hello. Hello.
Yes, we can hear you perfectly.
Good evening, everyone. I hope that my voice is coming out all right. You can hear me, everybody?
Yes, and perfectly.
Okay, so like this word is just something prepared at the last minute, and I hope that the words will do justice to our esteemed guests. Good evening, everyone. Distinguished guests, esteemed colleagues, dedicated scholars and researchers in the field of translation. It is with a profound sense of privilege that I extend, on behalf of the Master's Program in Translation, Culture, and Digital Media, a most cordial welcome to each one of you for today's significant academic gathering. In an era defined by a global communication, and translation plays a very great role, as you all know, in the field of translation. Interpreting as well is a very great strategy of translating and transferring information from one language to another. So today, we are exceptionally privileged that our guidance today will come from three esteemed doctoral researchers. Is that right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, from one of the most revered institutions in our field, and I had the chance to be there once, and I was a student in that university, the King Fahd School of Translation in Tangier. Please join me in formally acknowledging and distinguished presenters, Mr. Faycal Seffar, right? Mr. Ahmed Bangoura, and Mr. Brahim Rquabi, right? Their ongoing doctoral research places them at the very frontier of our discipline, and we are fortunate to benefit from their scholarly insight and practical expertise in the field of translation and also interpreting. The title of their session, they're going to be leading this session, and they're going to be our presenters today. It will be about terminology, translation, and interpreting in practice. Speaks directly to a central imperative in a contemporary professional training: the urgent need to bridge the intellectual rigor of our academic pursuits with the dynamic and often demanding realities of the professional world. As you all know, that interpreting is a very, very challenging translation task, and it needs, it requires a lot of, or a big deal of information to be a good. Therefore, the focus of today's discourse will be will be practice oriented, which is very great for students and researchers in the field of translation. As so, we welcome our students today, because this will be for sure a very fruitful webinar. And of course, this is going to be more than a presentation. It is an invitation to an in-depth collaborative exploration of interpreting. We encourage you to engage thoughtfully, as the insights shared promise to be both illuminating and instrumental for your professional developments as students and as researchers in the field of translation, of course. Without further ado, let us commence this valuable exploration. It is now my distinct honor to invite our first speaker to start his presentation. All right. Who is the first presenter for today?
Hello there, can you hear me?
Yeah, the floor is yours. Your name again?
Faycal Seffar.
Yeah, nice to meet you. Nice to meet you all. And I hope that will be, or that this presentation or this webinar in general will meet all your expectations. The floor is yours, Mr. Faycal. Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Qasimi. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our academic webinar titled Terminology, Translation, and Interpreting in Practice. This session is hosted by the Master's Program in Translation Culture and Digital Media from the Pluridisciplinary Faculty of Nador. So thank you, Mr. Qasimi, again for hosting us. And thank you, Mr. Mrabih Hadi, for coordinating this academic webinar. Thank you so much. So my name is Faycal Seffar, a PhD candidate at King Fahd School of Translation in Tangier, and I'll be moderating today's webinar. So I will be the first one to present the first segment, and then I will pass the floor to my colleague, Mr. Ahmed Bangoura, and then we will pass the floor to Mr. Brahim Rquabi at the end. So before we begin, just a quick note. I think this session will be recorded. I'm not sure, but just please, if you have any questions, please leave them at the chat, and we will tackle and we will answer all of those questions at the end in the QA segment. So today's objective is straightforward. We will deliver a practical operational techniques in terminology, translation, and interpreting. And we will try to apply them directly in hands-on experience exercises. So we'll move from concept to analysis to real-world application. So I will start by laying the groundwork with core terminology principles. And after that, my colleague Ahmed will take over with translation strategies, and Brahim will conclude with interpreting insights. Okay, so let's begin. I will share my screen with you. Okay. Okay, are you able to see the screen? Is it showing?
Yes, Mr. Faycal is showing.
Okay, thank you. Perfect. Okay, so let's begin. So I will be talking about core terminology concepts for global communication, or basically for specialized communication. Our focus will be basically on actionable insights for translation and interpreting workflows. So we will try to link it to translation and interpreting. So today's presentation will focus on three key areas: the theoretical foundation of terminology, and second, the practical methods by which terms are created in different languages, and third, a simple framework you can apply immediately to your own work. So let's begin. Sorry about that. I apologize. I think I encountered some problems with the network. Can you hear me now? I apologize. Okay, I will just share my screen again. Okay, perfect. Okay, so as I was saying, so over the next 15 minutes, we'll explore core terminology concepts that form the foundation of professional translation and interpreting work. So whether you are a translator, interpreter, or language professional, understanding how terms are formed, classified, and applied will significantly enhance your ability to work with specialized language accurately and consistently. So today's presentation focuses on three key areas. First, the theoretical foundation of terminology, and second, the practical methods by which terms are created in different languages, and third, a simple framework you can apply immediately to your own work. So let's begin. First, what does terminology mean to you? If you could answer in the chat, if you could tell me, what does terminology mean to you? What does the word terminology mean? What does it refer to? And I will read your replies on the chat. TM, TB. Okay, seems like no one is answering. Okay, I'll just, terminology is the collective noun describing terms in a language, maybe. Is the collective noun describing terms in a language, maybe. Okay, the right word in the right place when we're transferring. Okay, specific words used in a particular field. Okay, there's a collection of words relevant to a field. Okay, translation memory. Okay. Okay, so basically it has two meanings. So terminology with the capital T, that refers to the science behind terms. While terminology with the lowercase, it refers to a set of terms used in a specific field. For example, medical terminology or engineering terminology, something like that. Okay, so I'll just continue. So it is a collection of specialized words used in a particular field. That is also true, and it is a method for organizing knowledge and establishing clear relationships between concepts. And it is an essential infrastructure for professional communication, translation, and interpreting. So all of these answers are correct. So let's look at definitions from some scholars and from the ISO, the International Standardization Organization. So in this document, 704-2000, it's an international standard. So it defines terminology as the discipline dedicated to the study of concepts and terms used in specialized languages. Juan C. Sager, who is an academic scholar, he defines terminology as the set of practices and methods used for the collection, description, and presentation of terms. A theory explaining relationships between concepts and terms and a vocabulary of a special subject field. So as you can see, Juan C. Sager combines the two definitions, the terminology with a capital T and the lowercase t. And for the Translation Bureau, it defines it as the set of special words belonging to a science, an art, or a social entity. For example, the terminology of medicine or the terminology of computer specialists. And of course, Ali Al-Qasmi was an Arab scholar. He defines it as in Arabic. علم المصطلح هو العلم الذي يبحث في العلاقة بين المفاهيم العلمية والمصطلحات اللغوية, which translates to terminology is the science that investigates the relationship between scientific concepts and linguistic terms. So now, what unites all these definitions? I mean, they all recognize that terminology is about precision, consistency, and they all focus on the relationship between concepts and their linguistic forms or their designations. Okay, now we move to the next slide. So terms versus words, precision in specialized languages. So now let's make a crucial distinction, the difference between words and terms. And this is really important. So a word in general language is often polysemous, which means it has multiple meanings. Consider the word eye, for example. The word eye, in everyday English, it refers to the organ of sight. But eye also means the opening in a needle, for example. It's also the center of a storm. So as you can see, it has multiple meanings because this is a word. So context determines this meaning when it comes to words. But a term, on the other hand, is in specialized languages, it is univocal. It designates one precise concept in a specific field. For example, in medical terminology, cornea refers to one thing and one thing only. It is the transparent front of the eye. There is no ambiguity. It only has one meaning. That's why it is called a term. So here is the key insight. The distinction is contextual. The same linguistic form can be a word in general language and a term in a specialized field. So a mouse, for example, it can be a word and it can be a term at the same time. So when we talk, when in general language, when mouse is considered a word, when it refers to a small rodent, you know, the mouse. But when it refers to, when we talk about computing, when it refers to the pointing device, the mouse that we plug into our computers, now it's a term. So now we have moved to specialized language. So as I mentioned, so a noun, a word can be a term and a word at the same time. So this university principle, this one term, one concept, is the foundation of professional terminology work. It ensures that when you translate or interpret a term, you are capturing the exact concept intended. So now we move to the concept triangle. This concept triangle, the object, concept, and term. So there, it's like a triangle with each angle. We have object, we have concept, and we have the term, or the linguistic designation or appellation for the term. So to understand terminology deeply, we need to understand the concept triangle. So it is a model developed by Eugene Wooster, the founder of modern terminology. The triangle has three elements. First, objects, and these are entities in the real world, whether concrete or abstract. And a computer is an object, for example. A disease is an object. A legal concept is an object. Second, we have concepts. These are mental representations of objects. They are characterized by their essential features. The concept of a computer, for example, it includes the understanding that it's an electronic machine that processes data. And the concept of diabetes, for example, it includes understanding it's a metabolic disorder affecting blood sugar regulation. Third, we have the terms. These are linguistic labels we assign to concepts. In English, we say computer. In French, we say ordinateur. And in Arabic, we say hasoub. So all three terms refer to the same concept. So here is a critical principle. We work from concept to term, not the reverse. So we always work from concept to term, not the reverse. So when you translate, you are not translating words. You are mapping concepts from one language to another. You identify the concepts in the source language, and then you find appropriate term in the target language. So this model is fundamental. It explains why direct word-for-word translation often fails and why understanding the underlying concept is essential for accurate translation. And now we move to the next slide. So now we're going to talk about affixation, which is the primary method used in English and French morphology. So let's start with English and French, which share a similar morphological system, which is linear morphology. So affixation is the primary method. It means creating new terms by adding prefixes or suffixes to a base word or a root. So prefixes modify meaning at the beginning. For example, un is a prefix meaning negation. It means undo. For example, in undo, in untie, unhappy. Re, it means repetition, rewrite, redo, reconsider. And suffixes often change the word class. For example, take the word accept. When you add A-N-C-E to the end of it, it becomes acceptance. Add able and you get acceptable, an adjective. So in French, the same principle applies. Affiche, for example, means poster. When you add age at the end and you get affichage, it's like it means posting or displaying. You add er and you get afficher, and it becomes a verb to post or to display. So why is this important? Because affixation is highly productive and transparent. So once you recognize the affix, you can predict the meaning of new terms. If you know isation creates nouns from verbs, then you can understand that digitalization, even if you have never encountered it before. So it's really important to familiarize yourself with affixes, whether prefixes or suffixes. And it's really important to take a look at the most common Latin and Greek affixes, because those are the ones used in French mostly and in English as well. So this predictability makes affixation the most efficient term formation method in English and French. Now we move to Arabic and the method used in Arabic. So for Arabic, it actually operates in a fundamentally different morphological principle. The root and pattern system, which is non-linear, unlike the linear system of English and French. So in Arabic, the root typically consists of 3 consonants that carry the core semantic meaning. For let's take the root kataba, for example, which relates to writing or to write. So now we can apply different patterns to it. Those patterns are basically templates of vowels that are imposed on this root to create different words. So with the pattern, when you add the fa'il pattern to kataba, it becomes katib, which means a writer. And if you add the maf'al pattern to kataba, it becomes maktab, which means office. And the last one, kitab, which means a book. So all these words, they share the same root and semantic core. So, but when you apply different patterns, they specify different roles or aspects. So the root provides semantic consistency, and the patterns provide grammatical and semantic variations. So this is fundamentally different from English and French. In English, write, writer, and writing are related, but the morphological process is linear. You add suffixes. You either add them at the beginning or at the end. You either add prefixes or suffixes. Sequentially in Arabic, the consonants and vowels interleave. They create a non-linear system. So for translators working with Arabic, this is crucial. Once you identify the root, you understand the semantic relationship between seemingly different words. And this systematic nature makes Arabic morphology highly predictable and elegant. Now we move to the next slide. So when we talk about term formation, so now let's discuss the three primary methods of term formation, starting with derivation. So derivation means creating new terms using the morphological resources already present within a language. So this includes affixation, of course, but it also includes compounding and conversion. So for example, in English, heat is a noun, and you add the suffix er and it becomes heater, a device that produces heat. The meaning is transparent and predictable. In Arabic, we have hasub, and it becomes, which means computer, becomes hawsaba, which is computing. So you can derive hawsaba or any other word, and again, the relationship is really clear. You can see the link between the words. So why do we prioritize derivation? So first, it promotes linguistic economy. So we can avoid compounding and having terms that are long. So like I said, it prioritizes linguistic economy, and you use the language's own resources. And second, it ensures consistency, and the derived terms are intuitively related to their base forms. Third, it enhances acceptability. Speakers recognize derived terms as legitimate and natural. So for translators, recognizing the derivational patterns helps you predict meaning and maintain consistency in your terminology. Now we move to the next slide. Now the second method is borrowing, which is adopting a term from another language when a new concept is introduced from another culture or language community. So there are two types of borrowing. There is the direct loans and loan translation. So direct loans involve adopting the foreign word with minimal change. Tsunami, for example, comes from Japanese, computer is English, but it's being borrowed into many languages. In Arabic, we have computer, and it is a direct loan from English. Now, when we talk about loan translation, also referred to as calque, it involves translating the components literally. The classic example is skyscraper, which is, in French, they created gratte-ciel, which is literally scrape sky, translating the concept rather than borrowing the word directly. So ISO 704 recommends giving preference to native language expressions when possible. This maintains linguistic identity while acknowledging that borrowing is necessary for international concepts, especially in technology, science, and business. So for translators, recognizing borrowed terms helps you understand that their origin and decide whether to adopt them directly or create a native equivalent. This is particularly important in specialized fields where international terminology dominates. Now we move to the next slide. So the third method is coinage, which is creating entirely new terms, often for novel concepts that have no existing name in any language. So blending is one form of coinage. You combine parts of two words to create a new one. For example, smoke plus fog equals smog. So breakfast plus lunch equals brunch. These are creative, memorable, and they have become standard terms. So acronyms and initialism are also another form. NASA, for example, it stands for National Aeronautical and Space Administration. LASER stands for Light Amplification by Stimulated Emission of Radiation. AIDS is an acronym that has become a term in its own right. So in Arabic, blending also occurs. For example, we have كهرومغناطيسي, electromagnetic, which has come by blending كهرباء and مغناطيس. So here is a critical principle. New terms must adhere to familiar patterns. Synthetic fibers consistently end in on at the end, for example, nylon, dacron, rayon. This consistency ensures the concept system remains coherent, and when you encounter a new term, you can often predict its category based on these patterns. So coinage is the least preferred method. You use it only when derivation and borrowing don't work, but when you do coin a term, ensure it follows language's morphological patterns, which means you should prioritize the language you are working with. Now we move to the next slide. So now let's bring all this together. So into a practical framework you can use immediately. So the first step is to identify when you encounter a new or unfamiliar term in your source text. You need to isolate it, highlight it, and note its context, and ask yourself, is this a new or specialized term? Does it have a specific meaning in this field? What context clues help define it? And the next step is to classify it. Determine the formation method. Ask yourself, is it built with affixes, prefixes, or suffixes? Does it contain a root, especially when you're talking about Arabic? Is it borrowed from another language, or is it a new coinage or a blend? And step 3 is to predict. Use declassification to predict the term's meaning and translation strategy. What is the likely meaning based on its morphology? What translation strategy should you use, adapt, borrow, or coin? Are there potential consistency issues with prior translations? These are the kind of questions you should be asking yourself. So this framework is your mental checklist for every new term you encounter. By systematically identifying, classifying, and predicting the impact, you transform passive knowledge into active analytical skill. So the beauty of this framework is its simplicity. It takes seconds to apply, but it dramatically improves your accuracy and consistency. Now we move to the next slide. Okay, so let's talk about why this matters in your daily work. So understanding terminology supports translation workflows in 4 critical ways. So first of all, we have consistency. Terminology ensures uniformity across all your translated documents and projects. When you maintain a terminology database and apply it consistently, you avoid conflicting translations, and this builds client trust and ensures professional quality. And second, accuracy. Correctly identifying the concept ensures fidelity and the target language, and this reduces mistranslations, captures precise meaning, and helps you avoid false cognates, which are words that look similar but mean different things. And third, we have efficiency. Pattern recognition accelerates your research and term validation, and once you understand affixation patterns, you can predict new terms without consulting a dictionary, and this reduces research time and speeds up your workflow. And fourth, cross-language awareness, understanding how different languages form terms, linear morphology in English and French, and non-linear in Arabic, and this helps you bridge gaps and avoid morphological errors, and this leads to better equivalence between languages. So the bottom line is understanding term formation methods transforms terminology from abstract theory into a practical toolkit. Translators and interpreters who recognize affixation patterns, borrowing strategies, and coinage methods work faster, more accurately, and with greater consistency. So I don't want to take much of your time because I think I exceeded the time I was allowed. So we will skip the practice because we started late. And just remember this 3-step terminology process. And you can screenshot this this slide because it sums up everything. I'll give you some time. Okay. And this, you can also screenshot this one. This will be very helpful. Okay. And we can move to, I can move the floor now to my colleague Ahmed Bangoura, so we can save time.
Thank you so much, Mr. Faycal. Thank you so much for your enriching presentation. It was really good to listen to you again and to all these information. So without any further ado, I will proceed to have an icebreaker, first of all. My name is Ahmed Bangoura, and I'm a third-year PhD student of KFST, King Fahd School of Translation. I have conducted my master's studies in the very school. In 2020, I have joined the school. Then I spent 2 years in the MA entitled Translation in the linguistic combination of Arabic, English, and French. So I was in the Department of English. And afterwards, I spent 1 semester in Belgium, namely in Antwerp, in the University of Leuven. And I have come back again to Morocco in order to proceed with my PhD studies. So I'm now conducting my PhD research on a topic which is annotated translation. So I'm working on a book from Arabic into English, and the book is entitled Ana Bila Ma'alim, which was authored by Hassan Aourid, which is one of the most renowned scholars of Morocco. So that was all. That was an icebreaker. I think you have known what is necessary to be known about me, and maybe we can proceed to deliver the presentation. So I will not be very much technical, to be honest, as Mr. Faycal was. I will try to save some time in order to do some practice, or maybe receive any questions of yours if you have any. My presentation will be revolving around translation studies, theories, exercises, and some of the challenges. Okay, here we go. Sorry. Good. Can you see the screen?
Yes.
Okay. Perfect. So as I said, my presentation will be revolving around exploring translation studies, theories, exercises, and some of the challenges we face in the market. So to start off, I would like to define translation. We often hear that translation is hard to be defined by many scholars, but I do not like to philosophize a lot about this matter. To keep it short, translation is the rendition of a text, of a given text, from one language to another. But the complexity does not lie in the definition of translation itself. Rather, it lies in the translation. This is where the complexity lies, because it's not easy to render one language or one text from one language to another. One might be mastering 2 languages or more. However, without any prior knowledge of the culture or of the intricacies of the language in concern, so the translation might be failed somehow. Okay, so translation studies encompasses a diverse range of theories and practices, and they highlight the intricate relationship between language, culture, and meaning, as I said. This interdisciplinary field not only addresses the technical aspects of translation, but it also delves deeply into its cultural implications and the evolving challenges faced by translators in the dynamic job market. And I will try to give you some of the major theories in translation studies. I will not cover all of them, of course, but only ones I deemed of paramount importance, especially to my expertise or to the field, or what is being found in the field nowadays. So there is, of course, the equivalence theory, which was put forth by Eugene Nador majorly, and also it was discussed by many scholars like Catford, Jacobson, or Newmark. So equivalence theory emphasizes or put emphasis on the importance of achieving an equilibrium between the source and the target texts. So what it proposes is that the translation should maintain not only the meaning, but also the stylistic and the contextual elements of the original text to ensure the loyalty and the effectiveness in communication. There is also what is known as the Scopus theory. So the Scopus theory highlights or focalizes on the purpose behind the translation. It asserts that the intended function of the translated text in its target context determines the strategies and methods employed, allowing for more flexibility and translation to meet audience needs. I would like to just draw your attention to the term Scopus. I don't know if you are all familiar with it. By the way, I have skipped to say that we have with us many of the alumni of King Fahd School, and also some of the students of translation studies. So it might be somehow intimidating to speak in front of you. I know that most of you are aware of these theories, but it does not harm to remind you about them. And the Scopus, as I was saying, is emanating from Greek, from the word scopein. And the Scopus, if you can take it into, or maybe to have a similar word in English, you can probably think of scope. And scope in French is translated to champ de vision. So that's why scopein is defined in Greek as to see or to look at something. So when I'm looking at something, I'm looking at my aim, my goal. So hence, the Scopus theory revolves around the target or the goal of the translation. Okay, to move on, I will speak now about the descriptive translation. So the descriptive translation studies analyze existing translations to uncover the norms and conventions in various cultural contexts. This approach helps in understanding how translations are shaped by societal influences and the reception of translated works. Last but not least, the functionalist approaches. To be more accurate, the functionalist approach is kind of an umbrella that also encompasses or has unwrit the Scopus theory. And without further ado, well, the functionalist approaches consider the role and function of translations within their target culture. This theory highlights the relationship between the translation and its intended audience, focusing on how translations serve specific purposes in communication. And of course, these approaches or these theories are relevant according to the type of text we have at hand. So whether we have literary text, or we have a legal text, or maybe we are dealing with an advertisement. So all of these theories can have a different relevance according to the text at hand, as I said. The equivalence theory is foundational in translation studies because it highlights the need for fidelity, as I said, to the source text, while ensuring that the target text resonates with its audience. This theory underscores the balance between linguistic accuracy and cultural relevance to achieve effective communication across languages. As for the Scopus theory, it emphasizes the primary function of a translation, which should orient its production. So this means that the translators should take into consideration the intended audience, the context, and also the purpose of this rendition. And this, of course, it influences the diction or the choice of the words in order to put in our rendition regarding the language, style, and format. As for the descriptive translation studies, the examined translations in the sociocultural contexts, they provide insights into how translations reflect and influence the cultural dynamics. And by analyzing how translations are produced and received, the descriptive translation studies help identify the underlying norms and conventions that shape translation practices across different languages and cultures. Okay, so when it comes to functionalist approaches, one of the most renowned scholars of this approach, Christian Nord, who emphasized on the purpose-driven translation, which means that we should know what is the purpose of our translation, why are we doing this rendition, and to whom are we translating. So the functionalist approaches prioritize the intended function of the translated texts in its targets, environment, emphasizing how translations can serve specific or some given communicative purposes. This perspective considers the needs of the audience and the context in which the translation will be used. Another aspect or point that should be also taken into account, as I told you, which is the audience and the cultural context. By understanding the target audience's expectations and cultural context, translators can adapt their strategies or methods to ensure that the translation meets the specific requirements of the situation, facilitating better communication, of course. And then we have also to take into account the roles of translation, what roles this translation can play. So the functionalist approaches encourage translators to take into account various roles translations might play, such as informational, persuasive, or artistic, allowing for a more tailored and effective translation approach. I will skip this slide or these couple of slides since we have this constraint of time. I will keep these exercises by the end of the presentations. I mean, after Mr. Brahim delivers his presentation, maybe we can go back to have a look at a given text that I have prepared, and that we can translate together and see what kind of choices we can make and what kind of or what terms we can opt for. Yeah. So here is a just small overview of the case studies we have in translation. A timeline that highlights significant case studies in translation, analyzing strategies and their outcomes. So around 25 years ago, the translation of literary works gained prominence with a focus on analyzing how cultural context influences translation choices or diction. So this period saw a rise of in critical reception studies, examining how translations were received by audiences. Afterwards, in the 2010s, case studies of technology-assisted translations showcase the evolving strategies in translation practices, revealing the interplay between human and machine translations. And of course, nowadays, with the emergence of AI, recent studies highlight the impact of cultural adaptation in translations for global brands, illustrating the importance of context in effective communication across cultures. Good. So we will swiftly move on to speak about some challenges in translation practice. Of course, there is the market demand. There is also what should be taken into account is this imbalance between the demand and offer. So you might find sometimes that the offer is abundant. However, the demand is not that much, or it's not balanced, which leads the market to be to have a disequilibrium between the demand and offer. So the translation job market is influenced by the demand for specific languages and fields of expertise, which can fluctuate based on global events, trade relations, and cultural exchanges. This is why translators may face challenges in finding stable job opportunities, particularly in less common languages or specialized subjects. There is also the language proficiency and cultural nuance. So successful translation requires not only linguistic skills or competencies, but also deep cultural understanding, as I have mentioned earlier. And without this, nuances and context may be lost, leading to misinterpretations. So this challenge is particularly significant or of paramount importance in fields such as literature, marketing, and legal translation, where cultural sensitivity is very significant. Moreover, there is the aspect of technological advancements and tools. So the introduction of computer-assisted translation, or that are known as CAT tools. So, and machine translation technologies has transformed the industry, to be honest. While they enhance efficiency, they also bring challenges such as the need for continual adaptation to new technologies and the risk of reduced job opportunities for human translators. Because I have to be honest with you, now with the emergence of AI and with the continuous development of technologies, and especially CAT tools, we might say that the translation field, the human translation field, is at stake, especially with the accuracy they provide nowadays and with the rapidity they deliver the translation with. So I would say that translation field is becoming at stake nowadays, yeah. Cool. So the second point, which is revolving about language proficiency and cultural nuance. In the realm of translation, mere language skills are insufficient, and translators might navigate the intricate tapestry of cultural context, idiomatic expressions, and societal norms to ensure that translations resonate authentically with the target audience. And with the evolution of translation technology, it has transformed the landscape of translation practice, While tools like computer-assisted translation, the CAT tools, and machine translation enhance efficiency and productivity, they also pose challenges related to quality, accuracy, and job displacement. Some of you might wonder who is this guy over here. He's Joshan Hummel, and he's one of the founders and developers of STL Trados, and it is one of the most renowned CAT tools translators work with worldwide. I will later on give you an example of how this CAT tool works and how we can also facilitate the translation task with it. Yeah. So to conclude, the field of translation studies is at a pivotal moment, to be honest, influenced by rapid technological advancements and the ongoing globalization of cultures. As translation practices continue to adapt, there will be an increasing demand for translators who are not only linguistically proficient, but also culturally aware and technologically savvy. Is despite of the rise of these technologies and the emergence of new AI models that can adapt to language discrepancies. Humans are sine qua non, and they will still be sine qua non because of sometimes we might find documents that are very sensitive, and companies or organizations cannot trust AI in order to deliver the translation of these documents. So they will, by the end of the day, resort to human translators, of course, in order to render their documents, not only because of security matters or privacy matters, but also because of accuracy. I should mention that I have worked earlier or just recently with DeepL. I have been conducted by one of their managers. By the way, for those who do not know DeepL yet, it's one of the machine translation tools, and they are also developing their own AI models according to the different languages that they can provide translation with. And what I could say is that AI is still lacking some, I would say, cultural knowledge about the different cultures, of course, in order to deliver a very, very accurate translation to a given text. However, I wouldn't say that AI isn't learning now. By the time that I'm delivering this presentation, AI models are being trained in order to adapt to the different texts. So yeah, however, there is also room to use these tools and AI in order for our purpose, I mean for our sake, for our service, in order to make our translations better. And lastly, the future will likely see greater integration of machine learning and artificial intelligence in translation processes, offering both opportunities and challenges that professionals must navigate. And that was all. I was happy to give you some insights about the translation studies and some of the challenges we can encounter in the job market. I'm waiting for your questions, definitely, for your remarks also, if you have any. And in this QR code, you can find my LinkedIn account, so you can scan it. I will give you some minutes in order to scan it. And please do not hesitate to contact me at any time, whether for any inquiries or help. I will be at your disposal. Thank you so much. And by that, I will give the floor back to Mr. Brahim in order to proceed with his presentation. And I shall thank you so much.
Thank you indeed, dear Ahmed. So I'll try to share the presentation now with you. So can you see the screen now? Perfect, perfect. So thank you very much. Thank you, dear Faisal, and thank you, dear Ahmed, for the insights, for shedding light on these important translational aspects. Indeed, we've really benefited from the two presentations. Faisal talked namely about terminology. So I'll be switching between English and Arabic. So he talked about terminology, how we can identify terms, the importance of terminology, علم المصطلحية, and also how can knowledge of terminology help us in identifying and determining the structure, the morphology of words, and just to build on that, and in addition to what Mr. Ahmed said with regards to the approaches also of translation and the key theories of translation. Now, all of that is important. Why? Because we can't speak about interpreting unless we do have a nuanced understanding of translation. Now, and if we do really want to have a nuanced understanding of translation, especially at the جانب التطبيقي, okay, so the applied aspect, we should really be able to at least, not mastering, but at least be able to use terminology, to be able to deploy the science of terms, the knowledge of terminology in our translation, in our interpreting. Now, Mr. Faisal tried to approach that in the sense that he provided some practical steps into how can we put terminology into practice in translation and by extension in interpreting. That was the importance of the first presentation. Now, for the second presentation, that is of Ahmed, it's not of a less importance because it tapped into the theories of interpreting, the schools, let's say, of interpreting, and the approaches, the schools and the approaches of translation. Now, that is also important in interpreting. Why? Because in interpreting also we have schools, we have theories, we have orientations, and to really master interpreting, I'm not going to say that we need theory 100%, but at least we need to familiarize ourselves with theory, because when speaking about science in any majal, so we always talk about the concepts of tajriba. Okay, so someone else thought about something. Okay, so there was an observation, there was testing, there was experimentation and everything, so that leads to results eventually. Now, here comes the importance of building on other schools, especially when we are talking about translation and interpreting. Now, interpreting, of course, didn't just occur in void. Of course, it was developed, many theories were developed, many schools out there. Now, there are many ideas. Just this was just to relate to the first and second presentation and how we can just link the dots into continue with interpreting. Now, there was something very interesting that was mentioned in the Ahmed's presentation regarding the schools or the approaches. Now, I want also to bring your attention to the fact that there are similarities between interpreting and translation when it comes to theories. Why? Because basically interpreting draws on translation theories, because of course it was very difficult to study interpreting as a phenomenon. Why? Because interpreting is something instantaneous. It happens on the spot, and thus it's very difficult to study it. Think about, for example, déjà vu. Can we really study déjà vu, scientifically speaking? So that feeling of experiencing a past event in the present, can we do that easily? Of course, no. Why? Because we need to deploy particular tools, for, of course, for scientific research, quantitative, qualitative, but also some scientific tools, maybe neuro-related tools, for example, to study that phenomenon. But if we want really to do that, we should do that on the spot. I mean, when someone experiences déjà vu, then we should say, stop. So let's study this phenomenon. Now, that makes it very, very difficult to do that. I mean, by extension, it's really difficult to study thoroughly interpreting, I mean, from a scientific lens. So to understand it, how it occurs, the process and everything. That's why, just before sharing with you some key theories on interpreting, I would like to I would like to bring to your attention to the fact that since you've studied translation, I mean, in your esteemed institution, and of course your translation scholars now or in the future, inshallah. So I'm sure that you are familiar with James S. Holmes' maps of translation. Now, when we are talking about خارطة James S. Holmes, so basically we are talking about the delineation, the demarcation. Okay, so رسم معالم الترجمة. And we basically have two main classifications. We have pure translation studies and we have applied translation studies. Now, where can interpreting fits in? So if we want really to bring interpreting to be under the banner of this map or to position it within this map, that would be in pure translation. Now, under that would be in medium restricted translation. Now, and under this, we will have the human aspect, that is the human element. And under the human element, in return, we have oral and written translation. Now, this is according to James S. Holmes' map of translation. Now, from oral and in written translation, we have the classification of simultaneous and consecutive interpreting in oral translation. Now, I'm not sure if you've ever noticed that. I mean, those of you who study translation studies, so if you've really noticed this, if you go back to James S. Holmes' map of translation, you will find that interpreting was perceptibly mentioned. So it wasn't clearly stated, it wasn't really surfaced and foregrounded in the map, but it was there. And the classification was simultaneous, oral, human, medium restricted, partial, theoretical, pure translation studies. So that just to clear that point up for you. Okay, so now let's shift gears to the presentation. Now, when we talk about interpreting, first of all, it is important to differentiate, distinguish between interpreting, translation, and interpretation. Now, when we talk about translation, so ترجمة تحريرية, so we're talking about translating or dealing with written documents, so translating documents, namely, in the first place. Now, when we talk about interpretation, so we're talking about the process, okay, the idea of explaining something. So that would be tafsir. So to explain something, that would be interpretation. تأويل أحلام, for example, so the interpretation of dreams. Okay, so to bring to the table the possible, the potential explanations of something. Now, when we talk about interpreting with the gerund form with ing, we're talking about the science. Okay, so it's like the capital lowercase t of terminology that was mentioned by Faisal. So when we're talking about interpreting, we are talking about the science, the activity, the translational activity of interpreting. Now, how can we differentiate interpreting from translation on the other hand? Now, there is one denominator that you should always keep in mind, which is the immediacy of the translation or the translational action. So in interpreting, we are always talking about the fact that translation or conveying one message from one language into another, it's characterized by immediacy. Now, in the presentation, we will get to see some types of interpreting, modes of interpreting, then we can differentiate between them in terms of immediacy. Now, as I aforementioned, when we are talking about interpreting, we are talking about real-time oral communication. So we are talking here about the immediacy of translation, which is the main feature, the main characteristic of interpreting. And of course, when we are talking about interpreting, and this is also valid for translation, we are transferring or conveying meaning and not just words. And what I've noticed in the previous two presentations is the presence of an overarching theme, which wasn't actually explicitly mentioned, but it was implied within the two presentations, which is the concept of untranslatability. Because when we are talking about identifying the morphology, or let's even go the extra mile and say the etymology of words, we should also be cognizant to the fact that there are some untranslatable concepts, okay? And that's also known in translation studies as culture specific terms. Okay, so we have linguistic related terms and we have culture specific terms. So that would be culture specific terms. So that would be CSI. So CST, sorry. So CST in translation studies. So that would be culture related terms. Now, culture related terms أو مصطلحات ذات الشحنة الثقافية أو الدلالة الثقافية. So are those terms or these concepts that it's very difficult to translate them, okay, or to find an equivalent for that. And as of course was already mentioned when speaking about approaches, so Ahmed first talked about equivalence. Now, when we are talking about equivalence, we are of course talking about Eugene Nida. We're talking about the how can we really bring equivalence to the translational process. But I also want to bring to your attention the fact that many scholars like Eugene Nida and Jacobson and Lawrence Vinuti and et al. And others, they all agree, they had a consensus that when speaking about equivalence, we have three ways to see equivalence. مقابل وظيفي, okay, so the term, the word that has the same impact, okay, so in the other language, in the other culture. Now, in case we weren't able to find the functional equivalence, then we will have to move to the lexical equivalence, that is the dictionary meaning, the word-to-word correspondence, okay, so we look for one word and we'll look for its equivalence in the dictionary and the linguistic repository of the other language, okay, في اللغة في القاموس, okay. Then for the ultimate ratio, for the last resort, we have explicitation, also known as الإيضاح, okay, or الشرح في المتن. So in case we weren't able to find the equivalent, the functional equivalence and the lexical equivalence, then we can just explain. And that's something we can do using transliteration, for example, between two brackets, and then explain it using footnotes or endnotes. So now all of that can't be real in interpreting. Why? Because as I aforementioned, we do not have the luxury of time. We do not have the room to look for words, to look for the equivalence, for the functional equivalence, for the modus, okay, for the right word in the right context. Now, instead of doing that, we actually rely on techniques that we can use in interpreting. Now, we can't use techniques unless we are really able to understand what is being said, to understand the message, to understand the language. And to do that, it is even paramount importance to have a strong command and mastery of languages. This will allow us eventually to be able to deliver and to convey these messages in their interpreting between one language or more languages. So this is just to relate to the idea of untranslatability on the one hand, and also the importance of focusing on the meaning, as was already mentioned in the Scopus theory, which stands for purpose or aim, which really targets the target language, the target audience, okay? And it's like saying domestication and foreignization, but in this sense, that would be domesticating the meaning, okay? So bringing the meaning closer to the target's of course, language or target audience. Now, of course, interpreting here, more specifically, simultaneous interpreting is used in conferences. So, ترجمة الفورية. So, it's a service, it's a process, okay, and it's always in conferences, in international, multilingual conferences that bring international countries, people who speak different languages. So, to facilitate, to bridge communication between these people, we need to have interpreting. Now, if we want to have interpreting in these contexts, that is of conferences, congresses, meetings, etc., then we will need simultaneous interpreting. When we have booths, when we have microphones, where interpreters can listen to the floor and then interpret immediately. Now, courts sometimes في المحاكم, so we do need interpreting, but different mode of interpreting, different way of delivering interpreting. Sometimes it could be consecutive interpreting. So when one speaker speaks, make pauses, and the other one or the interpreter then interprets the message. In other times, it could be side interpreting or side translation, where the interpreter or the translator should read a paper, just scan it first of all, and then just go out of the cuff and ad lib, just do the translation, interpret that paper from one language into another. In healthcare, for example, we have over the phone interpreting. Sometimes some medical institutions, so they are in need of interpreting. Maybe they have patients from other countries, maybe some patients who do not understand the language, then they will need to resort to interpreting services. Now, to do that, they will require the services of an interpreter. Sometimes the interpreter is not based in that city or in that country. Then they can have an over-the-phone interpreting. And of course, medical interpreting, it's not as easy as other interpreting settings, because the interpreter should be very accurate and should be very familiar with the jargon, with the register, with the medical terminology used also in business. So business investment in media, TV, interpreting, etc., etc. Now, for the modes of interpreting, so when we say mode of interpreting, we're talking about how interpreting is taking place, how interpreting is happening, not the types of interpreting. Okay, so I want you to pay attention to that. Now, when we say types of interpreting, so it has to do with the nature of text. Okay, so we say political, ترجمة سياسية, علمية, ثقافية, فنية, متعلقة بالفضاء, etc., etc. But when we say modes of interpreting, so it's the modus operandi. So it's how interpreting is taking place. Okay, so the manifestation of interpreting. So basically, we have consecutive, that is تتبعية, تعاقبية. So when a speaker حينما يتحدث متحدث and makes a pause, okay, يقوم بوقفة, then the other المترجم يقوم بترجمة ما يقوله. Okay, so ولكن بعد أن يتوقف المتحدث عن الحديث. ولدينا أيضا الترجمة الفورية. So الترجمة الفورية so ترجمة آنية. So يقوم المترجم بالاستماع إلى المتحدثين الذين يتحدثون من خلال ميكروفون، من خلال السماعات، وبعدها يتحدث في الميكروفون ويتسنى لكل الحاضرين أن يسمعوا ترجمته على نحو آني دون ما أي انقطاع. أما الترجمة التتبعية فيكون فيها فاصل، تكون فيها وقفات حتى يتسنى للمترجم أن يقوم بتدوين ما قيل مثلا في ورقة أو في دفتر، وبعدها يقوم بتلاوة أو بالاسترسال في الترجمة. أما نوع آخر هو أيضا الترجمة الهمسية whispered interpreting chuchotage in French، وهذه الترجمة غالبا ما تكون في سياقات limited، في سياقات محدودة صغيرة. You can find this in cinema, for example. You can find this in limited meetings. حينما يتعين على المترجم أن يجلس بجانب المتحدثين ويقوم بالهمس في آذانهم أو الحديث على نحو خافت حتى يمكن لهم أن يسمعوا الترجمة، وهي فيها نوع من التتبعية، لأنه يجب على المترجم أن يسمع ما الذي يقع في تلك القاعة أو في ذلك اللقاء، وبعدها يقوم بالهمس بطبيعة الحال باحترام الصوت وبدون ما أن يقوم بالصراخ مثلا في آذان الذين يصغون إلى ترجمته. هذه ترجمة همسية. أما نوع آخر، الأنواع كثيرة، لدينا أيضا escort interpreting، ترجمة مرافقة. So that would be in tourism, for example، في السياحة. So when an interpreter يقوم بمرافقة مجموعة مثلا مجموعة من السياح، so they go to different places، متاحف, museums, so they go here and there, so the interpreter stays with them. Okay, so even if they're going in a car, I don't know, maybe سيارة رباعية الدفع, they're going towards the Zayt Rashidiyya, so the interpreter is there with them and he's showing them, so he's interpreting in the meantime. Okay, so that would be escorts interpreting. And of course we have RSA, so remote simultaneous interpreting. Now we do have remote simultaneous interpreting and we do have over the phone interpreting, so OPI, so remote simultaneous interpreting. It's the same mode as simultaneous interpreting, but it could be on Zoom, it could be here on Google Meet, it could be on other online platforms. But of course, we do have over-the-phone interpreting that I have already aforementioned, which is used namely in medical institutions and sometimes in legal context. So, for example, lawyers sometimes might need interpreters for asylum seekers, for example, immigrants, etc., etc. Now, of course, we can't do anything without, of course, having the right tools to do that. Should have a boîte à outils, should have this toolbox, so to be always at the ready to provide a good and high quality interpreting. So these are some of the prerequisites, some of the sine qua non of interpreting. So we do have active listening, so إصغاء, so then we have the ability to analysis, to understand, because of course in translation, in ترجمة, so you can't translate or interpret without understanding. So لا يمكن أن تقوم بعملية الإفهام بغياب الفهم. So it's a dialectical, if you may, relationship, علاقة جدلية. Okay, so also a strong linguistic and cultural competence. So التمكن اللغوي والثقافي. So as we have mentioned, so اللغة وحدها غير كافلة أو كفيلة بنقل المعنى الكامل، وبالتالي يجب أن على المترجم أو المترجم الفوري أو المترجم التحريري أو المترجم والترجمان أن يكون قادرا على استصاغة المعنى وفهم كذلك المعاني ما وراء الأسطر والمعاني المضمنة في النص، وهذا يقتضي معرفة ليس فقط لغوية بل أيضا معرفة ثقافية. Also note taking techniques، أخذ الملاحظات، تدوين الملاحظات، تدوين رؤوس الأقلام مهمة أيضا. لماذا؟ لأنها تسمح للمترجم أن يقوم بتتبع الرسالة وصيرورة العملية الترجمية. فحينما يقوم المتحدث بالحديث يحاول المترجم بدل أن يتذكر كل شيء يحاول فقط تدوين الأرقام، تدوين الأسماء، تدوين الأماكن إلى آخره، حتى يتسنى له أن to leave a cognitive load to process the information said by the speaker. So it's like dividing the process into two. So you listen. So if a speaker goes for 3 minutes, then you have to retain the key ideas that he's saying, so الأفكار الرئيسية. Then you should write down numbers if existed, for example, numbers, names, etc. So all what has to do with الأرقام, so anything that you really don't want to miss. Okay, then you can render his wording, render his speech, and then try to put that into the other language. And of course, in a careful manner by respecting both your memory and of course what you have written. And also simultaneous interpreting in particular here requires public speaking, because you will find yourself that you're speaking in front of hundreds of people, maybe delegates, maybe dignitaries, maybe important people of high caliber. So you should really be able to remain calm and of course to be able to speak confidently and make sure that stress is not going along with your voice, and also voice control, so not screaming so much, not being low, so moderately speaking, and of course trying to maintain a specific tone throughout the interpreting. Also you should be able to stress to manage your stress, because sometimes interpreters do stress when they are bombarded in I don't know, with information, or sometimes if they are not really prepared and ready to deliver interpreters, sometimes they might pump into stress and they found themselves not really doing their job, and sometimes they can stress, and this can lead to eventually burnout, and of course the loss of there will be a loss in translation, of course the message will be lost. Also there are some ethics to take into account, so just trying to respect the time allocated for my presentation. So there are some ethics to respect, so accuracy and fidelity to the message. So whether you are in a political context, in a scientific context, in a religious context, accuracy is a sine qua non. So you should really adhere to accuracy. So not adding, not omitting, and of course not substituting. Now this is for translation, of course, students. So if we are talking about translation, omit, but in interpreting, that's a faux pas. You can just do that. Also, you have to be impartial and neutral. So leave your ideologies to yourself. So put all of your ideologies aside and try to be impartial, and try to be neutral, and try to deliver the message as neutral as possible. Also confidentiality. Sometimes you can just, so interpreting is not happening in emptiness, in void. So sometimes you might receive some documentation beforehand, so you have to prepare for a particular meeting, conference, etc. And that's why you should adhere to the confidentiality of what was shared with you as an interpreter, because that was sent to you to prepare for the meeting, to deliver high quality interpreting, not to use it, for example, for personal interests, or to disseminate what was shared with you. And of course you should adhere also to professionalism, so keep professional behavior. So know that you are there to do a task, of course, and to respect the team you're working with, your booth mates, and of course everyone who is in that circuit. And of course we can't speak about interpreting in the luxuries, of course, the silver lining of interpreting, without speaking about some common challenges. And of course, as it is the case of translation, and of course if you are passing an entrance exam, your pet peeve, your biggest nightmare would be pumping into a word that you have never heard before. And here I'll go back again to Mr. Faycal's presentation and underline the importance of mastering terminology. to be able to decipher, to dissect the words, because that will help you eventually to understand the meanings, even if you do not know these words, of course. So لا يسع المقام لذكر كل الأمثلة, but I'll just try to go on with the key challenges. Okay, so fast speakers. Sometimes speakers speaking fast, so you will find difficulties in keeping up with the pace of the speakers. Sometimes they might digress, خروج على الموضوع. So they're speaking about, I don't know, aesthetic dentistry, then they will move on to speak about finance, investments, then they will speak about hockey. So you should really be able to remain calm and to see how you can really manage that situation. And of course, accents. Of course, in English, you will find different African countries speaking in English differently from the English that we've heard. Also, you have different Englishes, so Egyptian, so African with different countries, of course. Same with French. And of course, sometimes there are unclear speeches. So unclear, so here I'm talking about the language itself, it's not clear. Sometimes there are some technical issues with the microphone, so the voice is not really getting into your headset clearly. So there are some issues in the sound systems. Okay, sometimes dense terminology. So in some specialized interpreting settings, sometimes you will bump into dense terminology. You will find yourself that you're facing an avalanche, a barrage of technical jargon. So and that brings me again to the importance of preparedness and prior preparedness before delivering interpreting, because that would be 50% of your job. And after mastering, of course, the terminology, the common words of that, you will be able to deliver good translation or interpreting. And as على حد تعبير خوارزمي مفاتيح العلوم مصطلحاتها. So the key to sciences are the keys to terminology are their terminology. The key to sciences are their terminology. So mastering terminology will definitely help you in managing your interpreting task. And of course, technical issues in more simultaneous interpreting. So no need to mention that. No need to mention that sometimes we just share data from our phones, then connect to the computer, and that sometimes can cause internet collapse issues. Of course, sometimes you have issues in Wi-Fi. Sometimes there is a background noise. Sometimes there is a construction nearby. So there are some force majeure that you can't even control. And of course, there are some tips, of course, for beginners. So practice shadowing daily. So shadowing, so it's like listening to something and repeating the exact same words within the same language. So it's like an intralingual translation. So you're listening, for example, to a speech. So today I would like to think. So you are saying the same thing. So today I would like to think. So you're trying to speak with the speaker at the same time. So you're keeping up with the speaker, but within the same language. Okay, so before moving to interpreting, then build glossaries regularly. So masarid. So basically you can do that using Word, the application Word, or using Docs, or using any even your notes, for example, digital notes on your phone, or even your handbooks, just so that you can really get a table on. So for 2 languages, maybe for 3 languages or more, then you write the words, the terms in their equivalents in different languages. Okay, then record yourself to improve your delivery. So make sure that whenever you get the chance to practice interpreting, make sure that you will record yourself and that you will listen to these recordings so that you can really detect مواطن القصور ومواطن الضعف in your translation, and then improve them subsequently. And of course, stay updated on word events, so قضايا الساعة, so what is happening. Because generally, whenever there is a meeting, so that meeting will revolves around the status quo of the world. Okay, so what is happening? قضايا الساعة. So no one is going to I don't know, maybe even if it has to do with simple conferences, no one is going to speak about something that happened ages ago. So no one is going to speak about Cicero and Horace, for example, and their contributions to translation. So if anyone talks about something recently, they will talk about the advent of AI. They will talk about CAT tools. Okay, no one is bringing you ages back to talk about Rosetta Stone, Hajar Rashid. So always keep it on the daily and keep yourselves updated on what is happening around the world. Thank you very much for your attention. I know that due to time constraints, I wasn't able really to say everything, but I'm looking forward to your questions, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Brahim, for the presentation. Very insightful. If we can now move to the Q&A segment, could you please ask your questions in the chat? And maybe if you have specific questions to specific speakers, you can direct your question to them and we will get them to answer your question. Or you can raise your hands and we can start answering the questions. Thank you. Please raise your hand if you have any question. Okay, we have a question. So, question to Mr. Bangoura. Can we as translators pivot towards cooperation with AI machine translation for more accuracy and efficiency, seeing as privacy and security constraints will always limit AI's ability to take over most translation jobs? Mr. Bangoura, could you please answer the question?
I mean, thank you, first of all, for this very pertinent question. I mean, there is always a room to use AI and translation tools, as I have said, for your work. However, I wouldn't say that it should be trusted for all the types of translations. And it depends on the type of text you have at hand. Let's suppose that you are translating a legal text. I wouldn't advise at all to resort to AI tools for this kind of translations. I mean, you can in this context you can probably resort to parallel text or nosonomasia. For example, you can have translations that are already existing in order to see what kind of equivalence to opt for and what kind of techniques, for example, to use. If it is a less sensitive text, maybe you can resort to AI for having, maybe for asking for equivalence if you are having some difficulties in finding equivalence. So yeah, that's it. I hope I have answered to your question, and otherwise you can please still let me know if not.
Thank you, Mr. Ahmed. I think we have a question from Miss Lamia. Miss Lamia, you can ask a question.
All right. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for this fruitful presentation that tackled the different topic of interpreting terminology and translation. Well, I do have like two simple questions. The first one, I think though it looks simple, but I'm still looking for the answer. How do translators, choose the right term when there are many options? Because the first presenter talked about terminology that a word may have many like meanings. So how can we opt for the right one, especially when we are interpreting, either consecutive interpreting or simultaneous one. And also, I have a second question directed to the last presenter concerning interpreting, which is how to deal with difficult or ambiguous and unknown words or sentences when we are, practicing interpreting. How can we overcome this? And yeah, thank you so much. I hope my questions are crystal clear.
Thank you, Ms. Lamia, for your question. I will answer the first part or the first question, and then I will move the floor to Mr. Brahim to answer the second question. So as for your question, you said, how can we choose the correct word, right?
Yes.
So basically, I made a distinction between words and terms. So words are the ones who have multiple meanings. But when it comes to terms, they only have one meaning, a specific meaning. So the term only has one meaning. So that's why we need to focus on terms, because when you choose a term, it's very specific. So you should be focusing on terms.
Yes,
Terms
sir.
only have
So
one meaning.
do you have any like personalized way of like, a way to memorize like and categorize these terms so we can train ourselves to be more accurate?
Okay, so I'm having some trouble understanding your question. You want to categorize terms, or do you want some help on choosing the right term? What's the question exactly?
Yeah, choosing the right term, and at the same time, how can we choose these right terms? Because you said like terms are specific. I do understand this point, but when it comes to practice, how can I opt specifically for these words and not the other one?
Okay, so for words, you're allowed, there are synonyms, okay? So you can use synonyms. There's no problem with that. But for terms, you have to use the exact term, the adequate term. And you only have one, like I mentioned, the term only has one specific meaning. So there is a correct term for every single concept. So as for what can help you in this matter, I would just advise to have a look at, especially when it comes to English and French, have a look at Latin and Greek affixes. Okay, that will help you immensely. Just have a look at the most common Latin and Greek affixes, which means prefixes and suffixes. This way you can have a general understanding of these prefixes and suffixes and their meanings. This way